Imagine a brick that heals its cracks, or one that breathes, pulling CO2 out of the air. No, it's not science fiction. These are real materials grown using bacteria, not baked in kilns. It's called living building material, and it's turning construction from a polluting industry into a biological system. This is where biotech meets architecture and where the buildings of the future are grown, not built. Why construction is a climate crisis. The construction industry doesn't just shape skylines, it also shapes the climate, and not in a good way. Nearly 40% of global carbon emissions come from this one sector. That's more than all the planes, ships, and cars combined. Think about that. Every skyscraper, every bridge, every sidewalk, it all adds up. So, what's driving this environmental cost? Start with cement, the gray glue that holds our cities together. It's one of the most widely used materials on Earth, and also one of the dirtiest. For every ton of cement produced, about a ton of CO2 gets pumped into the atmosphere. Why? Because making cement involves heating limestone to 1,450 degrees Celsius in giant kilns. And what do those kilns run on? You guessed it, fossil fuels. But it doesn't stop there. Concrete structures degrade over time, roads crack, buildings need reinforcement, bridges corrode. That means constant repairs, replacements, and more emissions. It's a cycle, one that's locked us into high carbon living. If we're serious about building sustainable cities, we can't just keep patching things up. We have to start from the ground up, literally. That means rethinking the materials we use, not just at the architectural level, but at the molecular level. And that's where biology enters the blueprint, because nature already knows how to build efficiently, elegantly, and with zero emissions. From coral reefs to seashells to bamboo stalks, biology has been crafting durable structures for billions of years without burning a single drop of oil. The future of construction might not be synthetic, it might be alive. What are living building materials? Imagine a building material that doesn't just sit there like a passive block, but lives. That's the idea behind living building materials, or LBMs. These are materials created through biological processes, often harnessing the power of bacteria, fungi, algae, or other microscopic organisms. But don't let the word microbe fool you. These tiny builders are reshaping the future of construction, one cell at a time. Unlike traditional materials that degrade or crumble over time, LBMs can do something astonishing. They respond to their environment, they react, they grow, and they adapt. Some of them can heal themselves when cracked. Others are designed to absorb carbon dioxide, turning buildings into carbon sinks instead of carbon sources. And a few can even regenerate when exposed to water. Just add moisture, and they come back to life. This isn't just theory. These materials are already being tested in the real world, in walls, in bricks, and in pavements. Pilot projects across the globe are integrating LBMs into actual structures. From university buildings to small-scale housing experiments, the transition from the petri dish to the construction site is happening now. We're no longer asking if biology can build, we're asking how far it can go. Because if these materials scale, the concrete jungle might finally start to breathe. Grow your own bricks. Bricks. They've been around for thousands of years. Mud, clay, fire, and repeat. But now, we're rewriting the recipe with biology. One of the most promising innovations in the world of living building materials is something deceptively simple. A brick grown using cyanobacteria. Yes, grown, not baked. Instead of firing it in a 1,000 degrees Celsius kiln and releasing a cloud of CO2, scientists mix a new kind of formula. It's surprisingly low-tech on the surface. You start with sand, which gives the brick structure. Then you add gelatin or another organic scaffold to hold everything together. And then comes the magic. Cyanobacteria, tiny microbes that naturally precipitate calcium carbonate, the stuff that makes up limestone and coral reefs. Over a few days, these bacteria grow into a solid brick by binding the grains of sand together. No heat, no flame, just biology doing its thing. And as a bonus, the process absorbs carbon dioxide from the air while it cures. But it gets even cooler. The finished bio brick doesn't just sit there like a traditional brick. It's still alive, capable of biological activity, especially in the right environment. In some experimental setups, it can even reproduce if split and fed the right nutrients. Imagine a building that can grow its replacement parts. Imagine repairing a wall by watering it. This isn't just green architecture, it's a living revolution in how we build. Inside the self-healing brick, imagine if buildings could heal, like living organisms, like skin sealing after a cut, or a bone knitting back together. Thanks to microbially induced crack repair, that fantasy is becoming a structural reality. Welcome to the world of the self-healing brick. Here's how it works. Inside the concrete mix, scientists embed specialized bacteria, usually from hardy, spore-forming strains, like bacillus. These bacteria are tucked away in tiny capsules, surrounded by a stash of nutrients, just waiting for the right moment. And that moment, when a crack forms and water seeps in, the bacteria wake up. Literally, they sense the moisture and spring into action. Within hours, they begin to metabolize their nutrients and start producing limestone. Yes, real calcium carbonate. This mineral precipitates right into the crack, slowly but surely sealing it shut. The result is astonishing. A concrete that heals itself, often within a matter of days. No repair crews, no patches, no downtime. Just biology doing silent, invisible maintenance work. And it's not just clever, it's critical. By healing microfractures early, the material avoids bigger failures later. That means fewer replacements, fewer rebuilds, and a much longer lifespan for infrastructure like bridges, tunnels, and buildings. All while reducing the need for carbon-intensive repairs. It's durable. Most importantly, it's natural. And it's one of the smartest intersections of engineering and biology we've ever seen. Because when your building can fix its wounds, you're not just building for today, you're building for the long haul. Carbon-negative walls. What if your building didn't just reduce emissions? What if it actively removed carbon from the air? That's exactly what some next-gen, living building materials are doing. These aren't just low impact, they're climate positive. Some LBMs, like biogenic limestone, are produced through processes that mimic marine ecosystems. Instead of firing rock in a fossil-fueled kiln, we let bacteria or algae build up calcium carbonate naturally. The result? A material that locks away CO2 during production instead of releasing it. Then there's algae-infused cladding, living facades, where microalgae grow inside translucent panels. As the algae photosynthesize, they draw in carbon dioxide, just like plants do, except now they're integrated directly into the walls of a building. And it doesn't stop when construction is done. These materials continue to capture carbon over time. Like a giant carbon sponge, your home, office, or school could help pull greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere every day it stands. Imagine a world where entire city blocks function like forests, where walls breathe, where infrastructure helps undo the damage of the past. This is what makes carbon sequestering LBMs so exciting. They don't just aim to make construction less bad. They flip the script. They turn buildings into tools, not just shelters, but climate machines. We're not just dreaming about eco-friendly homes anymore. We're talking about buildings that fight for the planet, quietly, continuously, and one molecule at a time. Smart, responsive structures. This is where things stop feeling like construction and start feeling like science fiction turned real. Because living building materials aren't just sustainable, they're responsive. They don't just exist in space, they interact with it. This is the real game changer. Unlike traditional materials that just sit there, silent, static, slowly decaying, LBMs sense and respond to what's happening around them. They can change, adapt, and even protect themselves based on environmental cues. Some can alter their texture depending on humidity, expanding, contracting, or becoming more porous as needed. Others can produce pigments in response to light levels, adjusting color like a chameleon to optimize heat absorption or reflectivity. There are even materials that grow moss-like layers to regulate surface temperature and insulate the structure underneath. And the defensive capabilities? Some LBMs can secrete antifungal compounds, stopping mold before it even starts. Others have been engineered to release biofilms that repel insects or resist corrosion. It's like your building has an immune system. These are living systems, blurring the line between biology and architecture. And that's the breakthrough. Buildings that participate in their environments instead of resisting them, they breathe with the weather, respond to stress, and adapt over time, just like organisms, in an ecosystem. It's no longer about concrete versus nature. It's about architecture, becoming part of nature. Buildings that don't just exist in the world, but actively belong to it. Synthetic biology meets architecture. Living building materials didn't just appear out of nowhere. They're the direct result of a scientific revolution, synthetic biology. This field treats DNA not as a biological mystery, but as programmable code, like writing software, except the end product isn't an app, it's a living material. In traditional biology, we observe what nature does. In synthetic biology, we redesign it. We take microbes, like bacteria, yeast, or algae, and reprogram their DNA, to make them do something new. Not just grow or reproduce, but to manufacture materials on command. Instead of writing code that runs on a computer, we write genetic code that runs on a cell. So instead of DNA for making proteins, we write DNA to make bricks. This allows scientists to do some amazing things. They can design bacteria that generate specific minerals, like calcium carbonate for biobricks or silica for smart coatings. They can control the growth cycle, so materials harden at precise rates. They can even embed sensors into biological tissue, living surfaces that detect stress, cracks, or contaminants in real time. It's wild, but it's real. And architecture is one of the newest frontiers for this technology. Synthetic biology turned nature into a toolbox. Now architects and engineers are stepping in. The line between a biotech lab and a construction site is starting to blur. We're not just building with biology, we're designing biology to build for us. And that changes everything. Hurdles to scale. Let's be clear, this isn't magic. As futuristic and inspiring as living building materials sound, they come with a very real set of limitations. We're not growing skyscrapers overnight. Not yet. First, living things have needs. Many LBMs rely on biological activity to function, which means they often require moisture to stay alive and responsive. Too dry, and the system can go dormant, or worse, die. That's fine in controlled environments, but in dry climates or unpredictable weather zones, that's a big challenge. Then there's scalability. Growing bricks in a lab is one thing. Producing millions of them for commercial construction? That's still expensive, slow, and technically demanding. These materials don't yet compete with traditional concrete on cost or speed. And let's not forget the regulatory gray area. Most building codes were written for dead, inert materials, wood, steel, and concrete, not walls full of bacteria. Integrating living systems into legal, insurable structures involves a mountain of paperwork, approval cycles, and cautious policymakers. Also, longevity. We're still learning how these materials age over decades. Do they degrade, mutate, get contaminated? The testing is ongoing, and long-term durability data is still limited. So yes, most LBMs are still stuck in pilot projects and experimental pavilions. They're being explored in universities, design studios, and futuristic concept homes, not yet in everyday apartment blocks. But here's the twist. That's changing fast. Investment is pouring in, research is accelerating. And the moment costs come down and codes catch up, we might see living architecture go from sci-fi to standard. The future is not flawless, but it's growing. Rethinking architecture for life. Living building materials don't just change what we build with, they change how we think about buildings altogether. Because once your walls can grow, heal, or breathe, you're no longer working with lifeless slabs of concrete. You're designing ecosystems. In this new paradigm, a building isn't a sealed box that resists nature. It's a dynamic, responsive participant in the environment, a mini biosphere with its own internal logic, its own rhythms, maybe even its own health. Imagine this: homes that repair themselves after a storm, patching cracks before they spread, walls that filter out carbon and any other pollutant, cleaning the air passively as the people breathe. Roofs that grow insulation during the cold season, mossy biolayered blankets that thicken when needed, and foundations that evolve over time, strengthening themselves based on stress and soil conditions. This isn't just about replacing materials. It's about replacing mindsets. For centuries, architecture has been extractive. Rip materials from the earth, shape it into boxes, and hope it lasts. But living materials flip that script. They ask, what if buildings weren't a burden on the planet, but a partner to it? This is a completely different design philosophy. It's not about control. It's about collaboration, not about permanence, but about adaptability. We're not just constructing shelters anymore. We're growing living systems, ones that think with us, breathe with us, and age with us. Not static, not extractive, alive. Pilot projects? Redefining cityscapes. This isn't theoretical. It's not just another idea, floating around in research papers or sci-fi novels. Living building materials are already being used, and they're showing up in test sites, architecture labs, and commercial startups across the globe. Take the Living Architecture Lyre project in the UK and EU. It's not just tinkering in a lab, it's developing bacteria-powered walls and facades that perform biological functions like filtering air, treating wastewater, and even generating small amounts of electricity. These walls aren't inert barriers, they're active systems, pulsing with microbial life. Then there's Biomason, a US-based company that's scaling things up. They've figured out how to mass-produce bricks using microbial mineralization, the same process used by coral reefs, to form stone. No kilns, no fossil fuels, just sand, bacteria, and time. They're already supplying materials for commercial clients, proving that living materials can compete with traditional ones in real markets. In Spain, the Green Fab Lab is testing self-healing concrete blocks in hot, arid conditions, pushing the limits of how LBMs perform in extreme environments. The goal? Materials that thrive where regular concrete would fail. Meanwhile, at MIT and CU Boulder, researchers are developing living concrete prototypes that don't just heal, they grow. Under the right conditions, these blocks can double in volume thanks to the carefully tuned behavior of cyanobacteria embedded inside. This isn't fringe science anymore. It's early stage infrastructure, a revolution in slow motion, quiet, organic, ready to scale. And when it does, it could transform every city on Earth, one living wall at a time. Cities that grow themselves. Let's step forward into the future we're actually building. The vision isn't just smarter buildings. It's not just greener construction. It's a complete reimagining of what cities are. A future where structures aren't manufactured and assembled, but printed, grown, and regrown like living organisms. In this world, damage doesn't mean demolition. A crack isn't a crisis, it's a signal. A wound that heals, not a flaw that spreads. Materials are biodegradable when their time is up, but also regenerative while they last. Buildings adjust to shifting seasons, evolving usage, even the biological rhythms of the people inside. Imagine a city where the walls breathe with you, where your home tracks your circadian rhythm and responds in kind, where living insulation thickens as winters grow harsher, then sheds when the heat returns. In this future, construction isn't carbon intensive, it's carbon negative. There are no smokestacks, no steel furnaces, just bioreactors and microbial factories. Repairs? No more jackhammers or cement trucks, just biological patches and spray-on bacterial sprays that grow into place. Maintenance becomes gardening, demolition becomes composting. And homes? They're no longer fixed, lifeless boxes. They're adaptive systems, tuned to your behavior, responsive to your needs, and embedded in the larger ecology of your neighborhood. Cities won't just sit on Earth, they'll behave like Earth. Fluid, organic, intelligent. This is the direction we're heading. Not concrete jungles, but living ecosystems with skylines that grow, breathe, and heal right alongside us. Living building materials are one of the most exciting intersections of biotech and architecture. They flip the equation from extraction to co-creation with nature. They're not just sustainable, they're alive. If you too are feeling alive, like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the future of technology, cities, and life itself. Tell us in the comments, would you live in a house made of living bricks? Why or why not? Thanks for watching. Stay blessed and stay curious.